There are many ways to end an adventure. Quests can be concluded by marriage, by birth, by death. But sometimes all three happen at once. Sometimes an adventure comes full circle only when a story is finished. When that time has come, there will be a hush. You'll hear it if you listen for the absence of wind through leaves, or the lapping of waves against a shore, or maybe just the silence after a great battle won. Whatever it is, there will be a hush. And in that hush, we may hear the final lines of our stories. I remember the first time I heard them. I was very young, younger than any of you watching me now. The flames danced high, reaching for the night sky. They were beautiful. The villagers said so. My sister and I sat between the wagons, tucked under a blanket, listening to the elders tell tales by the light of the fire. They spoke of quests long past, of heroes who lived before our parents even dreamed of having children. And always, at the end of each tale, the fire would burn low. Only ash remained, gray, soft, still warm. And then there would be a hush. At some point during the night, I slipped from under the blanket and crept closer to the fire. Not afraid, not curious, just drawn to the dancing flames. I reached out to touch them, but my fingers found only ash. I sifted through it, surprised by its softness, and found something smooth and pale. I pulled it from the fire. It was not wood. It was too small and light for a stone. I turned it over in my hands, and in the flickering light, I saw that it was bone. I don't know whose bone or whose flute. It was just there in the ash, and I wanted to play it. My fingers traced the curves and edges. It wasn't difficult to find the embouchure hole, or the breathing holes. The bone was polished smooth by years of use and countless hands cupping it. It felt comfortable in my hands. It looked like an extension of myself. In my mind, I heard the music that was inside it, and I wanted to make it real. I brought the flute to my lips, closed my eyes, and blew. No sound came out. I tried again, harder this time, and still nothing. Frustrated, I looked at the flute. I was too young to know the song, too unskilled to draw it forth. All I knew was that I wanted to hear it. So I kept blowing until my cheeks ached and my lungs burned. When I finally slumped down beside the wagons, my sister asked why I hadn't slept. I told her I was too busy making music. She looked at me strangely and went back to listening to the elders. For a long time, I tried to forget about the flute. It stayed with me though. Every night I dreamt of music, and every morning I woke up wanting to make it. As I grew, I learned songs and instruments. I played for my own amusement and for others. But no matter what I did, I never forgot the bone flute. One day, I left my village for the first time. I traveled far and wide, learning new tunes and meeting new people. But no matter where I roamed, I couldn't escape those dreams. I would wake up in a cold sweat, desperate to find the music I knew was inside me. Yet, when I searched for it, I could never find it. And all the while, the image of the bone flute stayed with me, a reminder of the song I couldn't play. Years passed. I grew older, wearier. The memory of the flute and the music faded into the background of my life like a half-remembered dream. I married, raised children, built a house, and I put the memories of my childhood behind me, until one day, when my daughter was just a little older than I had been when I first touched the flute, she came to me and asked for my help. She was tired of hearing the same old stories by the firelight, the ones about the great heroes of the past. She wanted to hear something new. I smiled and gathered more wood for the fire. We settled down and I began to spin a tale unlike any other. I told her of a brave knight who rode a horse with wings, of a sorceress who fought with a sword of light, and of a humble thief who saved a kingdom with his wits. With each story, the fire burned lower and the embers glowed brighter. And at the end of each tale, there would be a hush. And in that hush, my daughter would find something smooth and pale. Not wood or stone bone, flute, no longer than a hand, with holes carved with care and polished by time. It had belonged to her grandmother. No one had touched it in years, but now she lifted it to her lips and blew. No sound came out, only a hush. It's like breath, waiting to become music. And in that moment, I understood. It wasn't the fire that created the hush. It was everything else, the wind, the trees, the world itself, holding its breath so that my daughter could speak her story into existence. That was how we ended our adventures, with a hush. And in that quiet, we found the music within us. When my time comes, and it will come soon enough, and when the fire burns low and the ash grows cold, I hope that my grandchildren will gather around me, just like I did with mine, and find their own music in the silence. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. If you enjoyed this story, please let me know. There will be more tales to come, more quests to be had, and more music to be made. So stay tuned and keep an ear out for the hush. It might just be the beginning of your own story. The moon was bright and high when the creature came to the window and looked in. The room was dark, save for the moonlight slanting through the shutters. It illuminated dust motes dancing in the air, and one small figure lying in bed, a child. The creature pressed its face against the glass. It wanted to reach out and touch the child's sleeping face, but its hand was too big and clumsy. Its fingers were thick and knobby like tree roots, so it drew back and watched instead. All night long, the creature came back to the window. Each time, the moonlight a little dimmer than before. Each time, the dancing motes a little less lively. And each time, the child turning restlessly from side to side. Once, the child sat up in bed and clutched at their throat as if in a nightmare, then fell back down, whimpering, and the creature's heart broke. At dawn, the moon was gone. The shutters were flooded with pale light. The dust motes were still, and the child lay quiet. The creature slipped in through the window without waking the child. It walked over to the bed and sat down beside it, then did something it hadn't done in what felt like thousands of years. It dreamed that night, not of animals or fire, but of air that moved like water, that bent like grass, that carried sound like it carried smoke. It dreamed of chasing butterflies across meadows in the wind, of sailing over mountains on updrafts, of riding thermals up into the clouds. For a moment, it was light and free, and everything it had ever been afraid of all at once. And then it woke with a start. The creature shook its head. It's clear-eyed now and full of energy. It padded out of the room, went to the window and looked out. Sunlight streamed into the sky, an endless blue dotted with clouds. A breeze rustled the trees outside the cottage and made the shutters shudder. The creature turned away and saw something lying on the floor, something small and thin and smooth. It picked it up and held it in its hand. This thing, the creature knew, was important. It didn't know why, but it felt it deep in its bones. It wrapped itself in a blanket and took the thing with it as it went to find the old man. It found him sitting in his usual chair, asleep. The creature climbed onto his lap and nudged his hand with its nose until he woke up and scratched behind its ears. Then it put the object down in front of him. The old man blinked at it, then reached out and picked it up. He ran his calloused fingers along its length. "What's this?" the old man asked. The creature went softly and rubbed against his leg, taged, but the old man only shook his head. "I don't recognize it," he said, his voice raspy with sleep. "Find someone else," and the creature did. It found the young woman scrubbing at the hearth. She stopped and stared at the thing in her hands, her eyes wide. Then she shook her head. "What's this?" she whispered. The creature whined again, louder this time, and pawed at her leg. The young woman knelt down and buried her face in its fur. She stroked its back and hummed a tuneless song. Then she stood up and walked away without a word. The creature followed her out of the house. She crossed the yard and went to the well. She lowered the bucket, then paused, as if unsure whether to go on. She turned to the creature, who looked up at her hopefully. The young woman sighed, then dropped the bucket into the darkness. When it came up, it was filled with water. But what caught the creature's eye was something else, something small and thin and smooth, sticking to the rope. The young woman saw the creature looking and smiled. She pulled the bucket up again and handed the thing to the creature. Then, something extraordinary happened. As the creature took the thing from her, it recognized it. Recognized the feel of it in its paws, the smell of it in its nose, the way it looked in the sunlight. This was a flute. And the creature remembered when it had one just like it, remembered how it had felt when it blew it, how the music had flowed from it, how it had soared with the wind, how it had been free. But that was a lifetime ago, or so it thought. The young woman reached out and touched the creature's muzzle. She was smiling, but her eyes were sad. "Play it," she whispered. The creature shook its head. It couldn't play the flute. It had forgotten how. It had never even known how to read music. But the young woman insisted, and so the creature sat down on the grass, curled its tail around the flute, and closed its eyes. Took a deep breath, and blew. Nothing happened. Again, nothing but the sound of its own breathing. The creature opened its eyes and looked at the young woman. She was watching it intently, her expression unreadable. The creature closed his eyes again and tried again. And this time, there was music, a low, hollow note, like wind through a cave mouth, like something ancient exhaling. It wasn't a tune. It wasn't even a song. It was just a sound. But something about it, something primal and powerful, echoed in the creature's soul and stirred something deep inside it. It played on, pouring all of its energy into the music, pouring out a lifetime of feelings that it had no words for. As the notes rang out, shapes began to move around them. At first, they were hazy, indistinct, like memories half remembered. But as the music swelled, they grew clearer, more solid, taking shape in the air in front of the creature. There were birds, swooping and diving, like swallows skimming a pond. There were trees, bending and swaying like dancers in a slow waltz. There was water, sparkling and shimmering like diamonds scattered on black velvet. And there were people. People with faces like the young woman and the old man, with eyes like the moon and hair like the sun. They were laughing and playing, running and jumping, flying and swimming. They seemed carefree and happy, unburdened by the weight of years and the ache of loss. The creature didn't understand what was happening, but it felt something stirring within it, something long dormant, something wild and untamed, something beautiful. As the music reached its crescendo, the shapes around them became more vivid, more real. They reached out and touched the creature, and it felt a jolt of recognition, a surge of affection, a pang of longing. These were memories. Memories of a time before loss, before fear, before solitude. Memories of a time when the world was full of wonder and magic, and the creature was part of it. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the shapes began to fade. The birds flew away, the trees swayed goodbye, the water shimmered and vanished, and the people turned and walked away. One by one, they became hazier and more distant until only the young woman was left, stood in front of the creature, her face pale, her eyes shining. She reached out and touched its nose. "Thank you," she whispered. Then the flute slipped from the creature's grasp and fell to the ground with a clatter. The music died. The young woman stumbled back, her eyes wide with surprise and fear. She stared at the creature, her face ashen. And the creature looked at her, confused, its heart pounding. It didn't understand what had happened, why the music had stopped, why the memories had come, why the young woman was afraid. It whined softly and nudged her hand, but she flinched away as if in pain. Slowly, very slowly, color returned to her face. Her eyes lost their panicked look and regained their focus. She took a shaky breath and stepped closer to the creature. She stroked its head, her touch hesitant at first. then growing bolder. "You played beautifully," she murmured. She brought them back for a moment. It gave them life again. The creature nuzzled against her, seeking comfort, seeking understanding, but finding none. All it got was a sharp intake of breath and a whispered, "No, you mustn't. You can't do that." The creature looked up at her, puzzled, and the young woman turned away. She couldn't look at it, couldn't bear to see the confusion and sadness in its eyes. She couldn't bear to remember what it had awakened in her. She fled into the house, leaving the creature standing in the yard, the flute lying at its feet, the music silenced, the memories scattered. And as the day wore on and the sun dipped low in the sky, the creature stayed where it was, curled up beneath the tree, listening for the music to begin again. I have told you about my grandmother before, about how she hummed, about how we would sing together when I was small. The sound of her voice is a chord that runs through some of my stories. But I haven't told you much about the woman she was, about the life. She lived before she became a grandmother, before she had children, before she was married, before time had leathered her hands and etched its story onto her face. This is the first story in a new series. I will tell it to you in 3 parts. And this is part 1. The child remembered her voice, low, dry, and soft like worn leather. Her name was Kaya, and the village called her the woman who speaks to the dead. They came to her for guidance, for comfort, for help finding lost children or lost things. They came to her for protection against nightmares and bad spirits. Some brought offerings, food or drink or yarn, while others stood awkwardly silent, holding out their empty palms. Whatever they offered or didn't offer, Kaya took it all in stride, speaking softly in a language older than the mountains, a language that sounded like wind through bare branches and like water over stones. Kaya never sang in the open, only at night, only to the fire, only when she thought no one listened. Now the flute sang with her voice, not words, not melodies with a beginning or an end, just pulses, soft pulses of breath and memory. It was not a song meant to be heard. It was a song meant to be felt in the bones, like warmth in winter, like silence after grief. She learned it from her grandmother, a song without words. That was all she had learned, and yet it was enough. It wove between the gaps in the spoken language, expressing what could not be said. A hand resting on the shoulder of someone who's lost, a mouth that does not speak but feels full of unspoken words. She did not know why she sang like that, or why her grandmother had taught her. All she knew was that it was so, and that some nights the song caught in her throat, and the only sound that came out was a sob. Then she would stop, pressing her lips together until the trembling passed. When morning came, she would tell herself, "I must have dreamed that." But when evening fell and she sat by the fire, the flute sang again, and the child remembered her voice. I am telling you this story because stories are memory keeping. We remember things we don't want to forget. We remember things we can't bear to remember. We remember things we never knew we remembered. But stories bind us to our memories. They make them tangible. So let me tell you about Kaya, the woman who speaks to the dead. Let me tell you about the places she went and the people she met. Let me tell you about the day the world shifted on its axis. Let me tell you about the girl who could breathe underwater. Let me tell you about all of these things, and you will remember them too. So I tell you about Kaya and the flute. Kay, about how the song changed her and how it drew near with every passing year, drawing near, growing stronger until it swallowed all other sounds, even her own heartbeat. She sang it to the new mothers, to soothe their worries, to the young lovers, to help them forget fear and awkwardness and say instead what was true. She sang to the villagers, to ward off the cold of winter, to help them sleep through the long nights. And sometimes, very rarely, she sang to the spirits. Most of the time, the spirits did not answer. They did not need to. Their presence was enough. But sometimes, very rarely, they did answer. And then the world would turn right side up again, and there would be hope in the air. In the pulse of the flute, would echo in the rustling leaves, in the gurgling stream. Then, one day, everything changed. One day, the axe fell, and our father fell with it. The axe had slipped from his grasp and cut deep into his foot. It was nothing, really, just an accident. But Kaya's mother, when she saw the blood and the bone, she panicked. The forest was full of bad spirits, she said. Spirits that took advantage of carelessness and made accidents deadly. She dragged her husband inside, screaming for the shaman. But the shaman was old and senile, and he only looked at the wound and shook his head. That night, Kaya's mother stood by the fire, holding out her palm, not offering anything and saying nothing. Kaya, still a child, did not understand. In the morning, her father left the house on stilts. He walked slowly and painfully, leaning on a staff, but he walked. That evening, the shaman came to dinner. He ate little, though Kaya's mother insisted he'd take more. "You must take care of yourself," she said, "or how will you take care of us?" And the shaman only shook his head and said, "There is nothing I can do. Nothing now." After he left, Kaya's mother cried. Why couldn't he fix it? What was wrong with him? Kaya wanted to ask the same thing, but she did not dare. Instead, she went to the fire and pressed her palms together, pretending she had something to offer. She had nothing, eh? And as she struggled to form words she did not know, she remembered her grandmother. She remembered her ancient songs, the ones that felt like home. That night, when her father hobbled back to the fire, when her mother slept and the shaman was gone, Kaya stepped forward. She did not know what to say, but she knew the tune, the one that soothed new mothers and helped young lovers speak their truth. She played it on the flute, the song without words, the song her grandmother had taught her. And for the first time, she understood why her grandmother had taught it to her, because it was a song of healing, of mending what was broken, of anchoring what had drifted away. When the sun rose, her father was asleep, and the flute lay beside him. Her mother woke first, and she looked at the flute, then at her sleeping husband. Then she looked at her daughter, and she saw that the song had grown, had filled the gaps in her small body, had given her purpose, had given her voice. That day, Kaya's father leapt on his stilts, but he didn't walk. He danced, slowly at first, then faster and faster, until he was spinning and leaping and singing with the joy of it. Each step was a prayer, each turn a thanksgiving, And when he danced, his foot healed, knitted back together by joy. That day, Kaya's mother understood. She understood why the shaman had come and why he had eaten so little. He had known her husband would be fine. He had known her daughter would heal him. That day, Kaya's mother stopped crying. She put down the offerings she had always held out to the spirits and to the shamans and to the world and started to dance too, spinning and leaping and singing. And in her song, she found her voice. Then a different dream came to him, one longer, more real, or so it felt, which made no sense because this was a dream within a dream. Within a dream, he walked across a plain that stretched to mountains in the distance. Above him, a single star shone bright. It seemed close enough to touch, In his dream, he wasn't alone. Beside him walked the woman from his first dream, the one who couldn't die. She didn't speak, but her presence was like a lullaby that calmed the wild thoughts in his head. He liked this dream. He wanted it to last forever. But then a change came over the land. The star above began to descend, moving closer, filling him with a cold dread. He could feel its icy breath on his skin. The music started, the same notes that had echoed in the cavern. The melody was haunting, beautiful, ancient. It pulled at him, beckoned him forward. He had to follow. He didn't want to, but he couldn't stop himself. It was like he was under a spell. The music grew louder. His feet moved faster. Then something wonderful happened. The music flowed out of the mountains, enveloping him completely. And for a moment, everything was perfect. As the sound swelled around him, the boy saw something strange happen above. The single star in the sky split into many thousands of them, falling like tears onto the land below. Some burned brightly, others flickered, dying before they touched the ground. Those that hit the earth exploded in flowers of silver light. They danced and shimmered, painting the darkness with impossible colors. It was a sight that stole his breath, filled him with awe. He wanted to reach out and touch those stars, but he knew he couldn't. And as he stood there watching them fall, a terrible realization dawned on him. Those stars weren't falling from the sky, okay? They were falling onto him. They were him. He was the sky now, and as he understood this, the dream shifted. The world became smaller, the mountains looming closer, their peaks scraping against the sky. He stumbled, falling to his knees. The ground trembled beneath him. And when he looked back, he saw that the girl was gone. In her place stood an ancient oak, its roots wrapped around the base of a mountain. Its leaves rustled, whispering secrets in the wind. And as he watched, the tree reached out a branch, beckoning him forward. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he had to go there. He struggled to his feet and started walking, following the path laid out before him. The music swelled, urging him on. Each step was a victory, each breath a triumph. He was leaving the old world behind and stepping into something new. And as he walked, he saw things that made his heart pound and his blood run cold. The forest floor was littered with bones, some small, some large, some human, others not. There were skulls with horns, teeth like daggers, claws like scythes. All around him, things whispered, shifted, and watched. Their eyes gleamed in the darkness. Their forms flickered, in and out of sight. He could feel their gazes boring into him, probing his mind, testing his soul. Kata, he quickened his pace, desperate to escape their clutches, their presence growing stronger with every step. He could hear their voices now, hissing and scratching, their words like venom on his ears. And all the while, the music continued, a beacon in the darkness, guiding him forward, deeper into the heart of the nightmare. And then he saw them, the source of the whispers, the eyes in the darkness, the voices in his head. Okay? They were everywhere, twisted and gnarled, reaching and grasping, hungry and cold. There were trees. And he realized with a jolt that he was walking inside a forest that had teeth and eyes and voices. It was alive, and it was trying to devour him. He tried to turn back, but it was too late. The trees had sensed his fear, and they surged forward, their branches whipping through the air, their leaves clawing at his skin. He screamed, a primal sound of terror and pain. He fell, the trees crashing down around him, their roots binding him, their leaves suffocating him. And then he woke up. He sat up, gasping for breath, his heart pounding in his chest. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the street lamp outside. He could still hear the whispers of the trees, the scratch of their voices on his eardrums. He could feel their cold, dead branches digging into his flesh. He was safe, or so he thought, until he heard it again. The music. It was coming from downstairs. He could hear the notes ringing through the house, echoing in the halls. He hesitated, fear warring with curiosity. He knew he should get out of bed and go find the source of the music, but he couldn't. He was paralyzed with fear, trapped in the prison of his own making. The music continued, getting louder, more insistent. He wanted it to stop, but he couldn't make himself move. He was stuck between two worlds, the familiar one he knew, and the one that beckoned to him from the darkness, promising wonders and threatening horrors. He could feel the pull of both, the safety of his bed and the call of the unknown. And as the music swelled, he knew he couldn't stay where he was forever. He had to make a choice. With trembling hands, he got out of bed and crept closer to the door. He listened intently, trying to make out what was happening downstairs. The music was louder now, accompanied by the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate. Someone was coming up the stairs. The doorknob rattled. The door creaked open, revealing a pitch-black hallway. He couldn't see anything, but he could feel the presence in the room, a tangible thing, heavy and cold. It was the music. It had come for him. Key could feel its icy fingers on his skin, its dead eyes boring into his soul. And in that moment, he knew he had no choice. He had to follow. He stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind him. The music surged forward, pulling him, dragging him down the hall. He stumbled, falling to his knees. The music swelled, pressing down on him, crushing him. He cried out, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness. And as he looked up, he saw it, the source of the music, the thing that had been calling to him in his dreams. It was an old flute, its surface worn smooth by countless hands. It was made of bone, human bone, he realized with a jolt. And as he stared at it, he could feel the presence in the room shift, the cold, dead eyes watching him, waiting for him to take the first note. He knew what he had to do. Cassie reached out, his fingers trembling, and took the flute into his hands. As he did, the music changed, becoming louder, more urgent, more alive. He could feel the presence in the room stir, the whispers rising, the eyes gleaming. He knew he was being watched, waited for. And as he brought the flute to his lips, he knew he couldn't refuse its call. He took a deep breath and blew. The music exploded, filling the room, the house, the world. He could feel the presence in the room surge forward, the whispers rising to a crescendo, the eyes blazing with unholy light. He played on, lost in the music, oblivious to everything else. And as he played, he felt something shift inside him, something ancient and powerful awaken. He was no longer just a boy in a house in the middle of nowhere. Key was something more, something less, something beyond comprehension. He was the music. Key was the presence in the room. Key was the whisper in the darkness. He was the eyes that watched and the hands that reached. He was the one who couldn't die. And as he played, he knew he would never be the same again. The music would be his curse and his salvation, his torment and his joy, his prison and his freedom. He was the music, and the music was him. The fire crackled softly in the center of the clearing, casting dancing shadows on the faces gathered around it. The late afternoon light was fading fast, and soon the forest would be cloaked in darkness once more. But for now, there was still light enough to see the worry etched on each face. For 2 nights, the child hadn't slept. 2 nights, they heard whispers in the wind and seen shadows flicker at the edge of their vision. 2 nights, the child had walked out into the darkness after sunset, not to hunt or to gather, but without purpose. It was unnatural. And in this world where nature was both provider and stern mother, what was unnatural meant only one thing, meant danger. By the 3rd morning, others had noticed the child's eyes, distant, their breath slower. They walked as if hearing something others could not. So now, here they were, the elders gathered near the fire, saying little, knowing much. One of them, the oldest, a woman whose hair was as white as the first snow of winter, took a stone from the ground and scratched a circle in the dust. Then she added a spiral inside it, tracing the lines with a fingertip. She looked at the others. It was a silent question, one they all knew. Was it time? A breath in, a breath out. The mark of dreamwalkers. Only the grandmother had carried that mark before. Only she had walked between worlds, communed with spirits. Only she had returned bearing gifts of knowledge and power. And now, so did the child. But the others only watched because what was happening was not theirs to stop. It was the grandmother's blood that flowed through the child's veins. It was her spirit that stirred within them, guiding, calling, pulling toward the unseen. And the child, though barely more than a babe in years, was in truth far older than any of them. For the grandmother wasn't just a dreamer, she was a seer. She'd foreseen the day when the mantle of Dreamwalker would pass to her grandchild, when the child would walk in her place. It hadn't been an easy path. The grandmother had faced trials and tribulations no one else could comprehend. She'd battled creatures that lurked in the spaces between dreams and waking, wrestled with spirits of earth and sky, but she'd persevered, drawing strength from the bond with her granddaughter, from the promise of what one day might be. She taught the child all she knew, shared all her power, poured her wisdom into every waking moment and stolen dream. And now, standing at the edge of the clearing, the child prepared for the final step. They reached out, tiny hand closing around the grandmother's gnarled finger. The touch sent a jolt of energy between them, a confirmation of the connection that had been forged over countless nights of shared dreaming. It was a communion that transcended words, a bond of blood and spirit. The child looked up at the grandmother, eyes wide with trust and also fear. In that moment, the grandmother saw all the battles her granddaughter would face, all the dangers she would overcome. She saw the triumphs that lay ahead, the victories hard won, the wisdom that would be bestowed. With a final squeeze of the hand, the grandmother let go. The child stumbled, then stood firm, the weight of generations pressing down on them. They took a deep breath, the air around them shimmering with power. Then they began to walk, not away from the village, not toward the safety of the firelight, but out into the gathering darkness, out into the heart of the forest. The villagers gasped, reaching out to call the child back, but there was nothing they could say. Nothing could stop what was happening now. The child walked on, following the pull of the unseen, guided by instincts honed over lifetimes of dreaming. The trees seemed to part before them, the underbrush giving way as if nature itself was making a path. The grandmother's lessons echoed in their ears, the warnings, the encouragements, the tales of wonder and peril, all the knowledge gained through countless journeys between worlds. All the power accumulated from facing down nightmares and embracing dreams. It was all being passed to the child in that single moment of walking. The child was becoming the grandmother, reliving the trials that had shaped her predecessor. In the distance, a shape began to form, taking on substance from the swirling mists of twilight. It was ancient, impossibly old, and yet it moved with a grace that defied its years. The villagers watched, mesmerized, as the figure drew closer. They saw the rise and fall of a chest, the gleam of eyes that held the wisdom of ages, the slow, deliberate movements of one who had walked among the stars and dreamed of worlds beyond imagining. The figure stopped at the edge of the clearing, its presence filling the space like a half-remembered dream. It spoke, its voice a melody that resonated deep within the bones. The words were in the ancient tongue, the language of the dreamers, and yet, somehow, the villagers understood. They heard tales of far-off places and of battles fought and won against impossible odds. They heard of sacrifices made and victories hard fought, and above it all, they heard the echo of a legacy, the story of a bloodline that stretched back to the dawn of time, a bloodline of dreamwalkers who walked between worlds. The figure raised a hand, and the villagers felt a pull, a tugging at their souls. They wanted to follow, to step through the veil that separated dream from waking and journey to places unknown. But they couldn't, not without the grandmother's guidance, not without the protection of the one who bore her mantle. So they stood rooted to the spot, watching as the child took another step forward, then another. With each step, the child grew, becoming taller, stronger, more sure of themselves. Their clothes changed, flowing now in the manner of the dreamwalkers. Their hair seemed to shimmer with starlight. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, the child reached out, touching the hand that had come from the mist. In that instant, everything shifted. The world rippled like water, disturbed by a stone, and the villagers saw not the child anymore, but the grandmother, older now, her face lined with the wisdom of countless lifetimes. Yet, There was still a spark in her eyes, the same spark that had shone brightly in the child's gaze. The spark of adventure, of courage, of an indomitable spirit. The grandmother smiled, her eyes twinkling in the firelight. "I have walked this path before," she said, her voice echoing with power. "I have faced the darkness and emerged into the light. And now it is your turn, little one." She turned to the villagers, her gaze sweeping over their faces. "You are the keepers of the dream, the protectors of the balance between waking and sleeping. You are the ones who keep the nightmares at bay and welcome the dreams that bring hope and healing." Her words hung in the air, as a challenge and a responsibility. She knew that they would carry on her work, that they would ensure the continuation of the bloodline, for it wasn't just about her. It was about all of them, about the community of dreamers, of those who walk between worlds. With a final nod, she turned back to the mist, ready to walk once more into the swirling mists of twilight, to journey to places unknown, to face challenges that lay ahead. She was the guardian of the village, the protector of the realm, and she would not falter in her duty. The villagers watched until the grandmother disappeared into the darkness, until the firelight flickered and died, leaving them in total darkness, enveloped by the whispering trees and the watchful eyes of the forest. Then, as if awakened from a dream, they stirred. They murmured, their voices carrying the weight of ages. The child was gone, taken by the grandmother to walk the path of the dreamwalkers. It was a bittersweet parting, and necessary passage. They would carry on. They would remember. And when the next twilight fell and the grandmother returned, they would be ready to receive her, to welcome her back to the world of waking, to the life they had shared. For they were the keepers of the dream, and the dream was their lifeblood, their connection to the grandmother, to the child, to each other, and to the endless mysteries that lay hidden in the spaces between dreams and waking. Once upon a time, deep in the heart of an ancient forest, there lived a little girl who loved nothing more than to play by the river that flowed through the trees. She would spend her days skipping stones across the water and watching the fish dart beneath the surface. And when the sun began its slow descent, she would sit on a nearby stone and watch the sky turn from blue to purple to black, a canvas of colors as beautiful as any painting. One day, as she sat by the river, she noticed something strange. A faint melody seemed to be drifting towards her, a tune so delicate and ethereal that it sounded like the whisper of the wind through the leaves. At first, she couldn't tell if it was really there or if she was just imagining it, but as the sound grew louder, she knew she had to investigate. Following the sound, she came across a clearing she had never seen before. In the middle of the clearings stood a willow tree, its branches drooping gracefully towards the ground. And at the base of the tree, nestled among the roots, was a small wooden flute. It looked ancient, as though it had been there for centuries, yet it seemed to be humming with an otherworldly energy. Curiosity overcame her, and she picked up the flute. As soon as her fingers touched the cool wood, the melody she had heard before filled her ears, not as a sound she could identify, but as a feeling she could understand. As she continued to hold the flute, the melody grew stronger, urging her to do one thing, to play. Hesitantly, at first, she began to blow into the flute. The notes that emerged were unlike anything she had ever played before. They seemed to flow from her fingertips effortlessly, as if the flute was guiding her hands. With each note she played, the melody became clearer, and she realized that she wasn't just playing music, she was playing a story. A story of the wind as it raced through the tall trees, of the river as it tumbled over smooth stones, and of the sun as it bathed the forest floor in golden light. She played until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, until the stars began to appear one by one, until the forest around her fell silent. And when she finally stopped, she realized that she wasn't alone. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a wise old woman, her eyes twinkling like the stars above. You played beautifully, the old woman said, her voice like the rustling of leaves. That was no ordinary flute you found today, child. It is the whisper of the woods, and it is said that only those who are pure of heart can find it. The girl blushed, suddenly shy. I found it by the river, she stammered, and then I started playing, and the notes just came to me. The old woman nodded, a knowing smile on her lips. The whisper of the woods chooses those who are ready to listen. Child, are you ready to listen? The girl hesitated. To what? The old woman stepped closer, her eyes filled with warmth. To the music of the forest, child. Can you hear it? At first, the girl heard nothing but the chirping of crickets and the hooting of an owl. But then, as she closed her eyes, she began to hear a faint melody, a harmony of sounds that blended together in perfect balance. She could hear the whisper of the wind as it danced through the trees, the babbling of the brook as it skipped over the stones, the rustling of the leaves as they whispered secrets to one another, even the gentle sigh of the ancient trees as they watched over the forest. When she opened her eyes, she saw that the old woman had vanished, leaving her alone in the clearing with the whisper of the woods in her hands. The girl sat there for a long time, listening to the music of the forest, feeling a deep sense of peace and connection with the world around her. From that day forward, the girl returned to the clearing every chance she got. She would sit at the base of the willow tree and play the whisper of the woods, and as she played, the forest came alive with music. The trees swayed to the rhythm of her song, the birds joined in with their sweet harmonies, and the very leaves seemed to dance in the air. As years passed, the girl grew older, but her love for the forest and its music never faded. She learned that the whisper of the woods didn't just make music. It amplified the music that was already there, the music that connected all living things. And she realized that she wasn't just playing a flute. She was conducting an orchestra of the wind, the water, the trees, toad, and even the earth itself. One day, however, a shadow fell over the forest. The trees grew silent, the birds flew away, and the river seemed to weep. The girl felt a deep sadness in her heart and knew that something was wrong. She rushed to the clearing, her flute clutched tightly in her hands, and looked around in dismay. The willow tree, the whisper of the woods, was gone. In its place was a stump, bare and lifeless. Come with grief, the girl sank to the ground and wept. She had lost her connection to the forest, the music that had filled her life with joy, the very thing that had given her purpose. Days turned into weeks, and the girl grew thinner and weaker. She wandered the forest, calling out for the whisper of the woods, but there was no answer. Then one day, as she sat by the river, she heard a faint melody. It was the same tune she had played for so many years, the music of the forest. At first, she thought she was going mad, that the grief was playing tricks on her mind. But then she looked down and saw that she was holding a small piece of wood in her hands, a piece that looked strangely familiar. With trembling fingers, she placed the piece to her lips and blew. The music that filled the air was hesitant at first, like a bird testing its wings before taking flight. But then it grew stronger, fuller, until it echoed through the trees. The girl realized that the whisper of the woods hadn't been lost. It had simply been waiting for her to find it again, to play it once more. And so she did. She played until the forest echoed with music, until the trees swayed in time with the melody, until the birds returned to sing along with her. And as she played, she felt the joy and wonder return to her heart. She knew that the whisper of the woods was more than just a flute. It was a symbol of the enduring spirit of the forest, a spirit that could not be broken, a spirit that would live on forever. And as the sun set over the ancient trees, bathing the forest in golden light, the girl understood that she wasn't just playing a flute, she was playing a legacy. The child stood in a cave. The walls pulsed with ochre handprints. A single fire burned, not for warmth, but for memory. Across the flame sat a figure, tall, draped in furs, face covered in ash. The flute was in their hands, but not the same flute. It was newer, wider, unworn. The figure played, not for sound, but for calling. Shadows gathered at the edges of the firelight. Not beasts, not people, spirits of elk, of rivers, of wind. The child watched in silence as the first music became the first voice. I'm here to talk about the ways we use fire to see in the dark, to listen to the music that moves the world. In this moment, this is our only light, so we turn up the brightness until it hurts our eyes. This is our only sound, so we strain to hear the notes above the wind. These are our only companions, so we gather close and huddle together for warmth. We tell each other stories of the spirits that dance in the shadows. In the flickering light, the spirits take shape. We know them by the way they move, by the way they speak, by the way they carry themselves. They tell us things we need to know, things we want to know, things we never thought to ask. One day, we will understand what they mean, and one day, we will be ready to ask our own questions. If you would like to know more about this story, please support us by following these steps. We release new episodes every week. Now, let's get started. The first time she saw him, he was dancing with the spirits. She had been tracking elk for hours through the forest, learning his signs, his habits, his patterns, how he moved, and why. When the sun broke through the trees and revealed a clearing, she knew she had found him. He was there in the middle of it all, dancing with a group of spirits. She didn't see his face, but that didn't matter. Key could feel his presence, like a heartbeat beneath her feet, like the current in the river, like the rhythm of the waves on the shore. His dance was a powerful thing, drawing the spirits closer and closer, weaving them into a tapestry of movement and song. As they moved, the trees swayed, the leaves rustled, the wind whispered secrets through the grasses, and the very earth seemed to pulse in time with their dance. She wanted to join them, to become part of the dance, but she knew she wasn't ready yet. She needed to learn more, to understand more, to be more. So she hid in the trees and watched, and the longer she watched, the more she understood. She saw the connection between the elk and the spirits, okay? How they respected each other, how they honored each other, how they cared for each other. She saw the strength in their movements, the power in their voices, the wisdom in their eyes. And when the dance was over and the spirits had returned to the earth, she emerged from her hiding place and approached him. He turned to face her and smiled, and in that moment, she knew she had found something truly special. When the elders heard about her vision, they were pleased. They had been expecting this for some time now. They had seen the signs, the omens, the prophecies. They knew that she was chosen, that she was destined to do something great, something that would change everything. They told her that she must go to the mountains to find the one who danced with the spirits, to learn from him, to grow with him, to love him. It was a dangerous journey, but she was willing to risk anything to be with him. So she set out on her path, following the whispers of the wind, the murmurings of the trees, the guidance of the stars. Along the way, she faced many challenges, but she overcame them all with courage, determination, and faith. Finally, she reached the mountains, and there she found him, just as her vision had shown her. He was even more magnificent than she remembered, more powerful, more enchanting, more irresistible. And when he saw her, his eyes lit up with recognition, with joy, with love. They embraced, and in that embrace, she knew she was home. For many years, they lived in the mountains, away from the prying eyes and judging ears of the world. They learned from each other. They grew with each other. They loved each other. They also made music together. It wasn't just any music. It was the music of the spheres, the music of the soul, the music of the cosmos. Their songs echoed through the valleys, soared through the skies, resonated in the hearts of all who heard them. People came from far and wide to listen to their music, to feel their magic, to experience their wonder. Some said their music could heal the sick, mend the broken, soothe the weary. Others said their music could awaken the dead, raise the fallen, unite the lost. All who heard their music were transformed in some way, whether they knew it or not, whether they wanted it or not, whether they believed it or not. Their music was a force of nature, a power beyond measure, an enchantment beyond compare. One day, the elders summoned her once more. They told her that the time had come for her to fulfill her destiny, to use her gifts, to share her light. They told her that she must return to the world, to teach others, to guide others, to inspire others. It was a daunting task, but she was ready. She knew she couldn't hide forever, couldn't run away forever, couldn't deny her calling forever. She had to face the world, no matter how dark, no matter how dangerous, no matter how difficult. She had to show the world the beauty of her music, the power of her spirit, the wisdom of her soul. She had to reveal herself to the world, no matter what happened, no matter what anyone said or did, no matter what anyone thought or felt. She had to be true to herself, no matter what anyone else was, no matter what anyone else had done, no matter what anyone else would ever do. As they made their way back to the village, the one who danced with the spirits fell silent, his usual confidence and charisma replaced by a brooding intensity that both intrigued and worried her. He seemed troubled by something, burdened by something, haunted by something. No matter what she did or said, no matter what she offered or asked, he remained distant and detached, lost in his own thoughts and feelings. She could sense his pain, his fear, his doubt, and it tore at her heart. One night, she couldn't take it anymore. She confronted him, demanding answers, explanations, solutions, but he only looked at her with sad eyes and shook his head, still saying nothing. She was furious, hurt, confused, desperate. Why was he acting this way? What had changed? What had happened? Why wasn't he the same man who had danced with the spirits, who had made beautiful music with her, who had loved her passionately and tenderly? Was he losing his gift? Was he losing his faith? Was he losing her? She didn't know what to do. She couldn't bear to see him suffer. She couldn't bear to lose him. She couldn't bear to lose herself. But then she remembered something he had told her once, that the best way to reach him was through his music, that the best way to connect with him was through their dance, that the best way to love him was through their song. So she took a deep breath, calmed her heart, focused her mind, and began to play her flute. She played the song that had brought them together, the song that had united them, the song that had blessed them. He heard her and turned to her, his eyes searching hers for understanding, for forgiveness, for love. And in that moment, she knew he was still there, somewhere inside the darkness, trying to break free, trying to reach her, trying to reach himself. She kept playing, and slowly he began to move, hesitantly at first, then more freely, then more fervently, then more ecstatically. He was dancing again, dancing with her, dancing with the spirits, dancing with himself. And as they danced, the music swelled, and the spirits joined them, filling the space between them, bridging the gap between them, binding them together. He was whole again, she realized, and so was she. Their love had endured, their bond had deepened, their purpose had renewed itself. They were ready to face the world together, hand in hand, heart to heart, soul to soul. They were ready to show the world the light that had guided them, the strength that had sustained them, the hope that had sustained them, the love that had saved them. They were ready to reveal themselves to the world. In a cabin, nestled deep within a snow-laden forest, lived a family of 3, a man, his wife, and their young child. For days, a raging blizzard had kept them indoors, forcing them to rely on their dwindling supply of firewood. Yet, they had one last log, a thick, sturdy piece of wood that promised warmth for one final night. As dusk settled, the father, driven by desperation, decided to venture out into the storm to find more wood. He donned his warmest coat, pulled his fur hood tight, and stepped into the swirling snow. His wife watched him go, her face etched with worry. She turned to their child, her eyes filled with a strange, unspoken fear. "Don't go to sleep, my love," she whispered, more to herself than to the child. "Stay awake for your father." The child, too young to understand the gravity of the situation, nodded obediently, clutching his wooden flute, as if it were a talisman against the encroaching darkness. Hours passed. The wind outside grew into a banshee's wail, and still the father did not return. Fear, cold, and hunger gnawed at the woman. She looked at her child, his eyes drooping with exhaustion. She knew she couldn't let him fall asleep. So she began a story, a fantastical tale of a valiant knight battling a fearsome dragon, her voice rising and falling to keep him engaged. Then, just as the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, they heard the welcome sound of the front door opening. The woman and the child rushed to the door. The man stood there, his face pale, his clothes torn, but relief washed over them. He was home. He held up a small bundle. "I found this," he said, his voice hoarse. "It might be enough." Inside the bundle was a single, oddly shaped piece of wood. It wasn't much, but it was enough to rekindle their dying fire, enough to drive away the encroaching cold. The next morning, however, the fire would not light. The hunters argued. The wind turned. The meat spoiled. The child sat near the ashes, held the flute, not to play, to listen. And in the stillness, they heard a tone, a single low hum buried in the wind. At first, they dismissed it. Surely it was just the wind, they thought. But as the day wore on and their hope dwindled, the tune grew clearer, more insistent. It seemed to beckon them, to call out to them from the heart of the storm. The man, his face lined with fatigue and despair, looked at the piece of wood in his hand. It was smooth, almost polished, like it had been turned by the hands of a craftsman. He remembered the sound from the previous night, the haunting melody that echoed through the cabin. Was it a trick of the wind or something more? He didn't know. But now, faced with the prospect of another night in the freezing wilderness, he was willing to believe in anything that offered a glimmer of hope. He placed the flute near the coals, let the heat warm the bone, then blew. No sound, but smoke rose, not fast, not wild, just enough to bend attention. The hunters gathered closer, their eyes fixed on the piece of wood. The first tendrils of smoke curled upwards. A spark ignited in the pile of dry leaves below. It was small at first, just a faint flicker, but it grew, fueled by the wind and the desperate hope of the hunters. Soon, the pile of leaves was ablaze, casting flickering shadows on the faces around it. The hunters watched, mesmerized, as the flames reached up towards the ceiling of the cabin, chasing away the oppressive darkness. They didn't speak. There was no need for words. The fire was their shared focus, a silent promise of warmth and survival. As the flames crackled and popped, filling the cabin with a comforting glow, the hunters felt a surge of gratitude. This fire wasn't just a source of heat. It was a beacon of hope, testament to their resilience in the face of the unforgiving wilderness. The little cabin, once again filled with the comforting crackle of a fire, seemed to sigh with relief as the darkness outside was pushed back. The man looked at the flute lying near the hearth. Its surface, though still unadorned, seemed to shimmer faintly in the firelight. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands. It was just a simple piece of bone, yet it represented so much more. It was a connection to something ancient, something primal. He brought the flute to his lips, not to play, but to listen. As the fire crackled, sending sparks dancing up the chimney, he closed his eyes, letting the sound of the flames wash over him. The wind outside howled, but inside the cabin, there was peace. The little cabin nestled deep within the snow-laden forest had once again triumphed over the elements, and as the hunters huddled near the fire, sharing stories and laughter, they didn't realize that something extraordinary had entered their lives. It wasn't just a piece of bone or a sudden wind shift that had saved them. It was a whisper of magic, a touch of the ancient spirits that had watched over them in their time of need. The next morning, the sun streamed through the windows, painting the interior of the cabin in hues of gold and amber. The hunters awoke to the cheerful twittering of birds, their melody carried on the crisp morning air. The fire had burned down 2 glowing embers, but the cabin was warm, the threat of the blizzard receding into a distant memory. The man rose, stretching, and walked over to the hearth. The flute lay beside the embers, seemingly untouched by the fire. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands. The bone was smooth, polished even, and an intricate pattern seemed to have formed on its surface overnight. It was as if the very essence of the wind had seeped into the flute during the night. He brought it to his lips and blew. A clear, resonant note rang out, echoing through the cabin. It was unlike any sound he had made before. As he played, the notes flowed effortlessly from his lips, weaving together into a melody that was both haunting and beautiful. It was a song of the wind, a lament for the storm, and a celebration of their survival. The woman and the child stirred, drawn by the music, to the living room. The man stopped playing, his eyes shining with wonder. Beside him, the flute seemed to thrum with a gentle energy, as if eager to be played once more. The woman approached, her face etched with concern. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice thick with sleep. The man shook his head, unable to articulate the awe he felt. He handed her the flute, and she, too, brought it to her lips. Her fingers trembled slightly, and at first only a breath escaped. But then a hesitant note rang out, followed by another and another. The melody she played was slower, more mournful than the man's, yet no less captivating. As the music filled the cabin, the child stirred, his eyes wide with wonder. He crawled closer, his gaze fixed on the flute. When the last note faded away, leaving behind an eerie silence, the child reached out, his tiny hand hovering over the instrument. The woman smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "It's all right, my love," she whispered, handing the flute to their son. "It's all right now." The child brought the flute to his lips, and though no sound came out, the hunters knew that the spirit of the wind, the very essence of the storm, was with them now. The little cabin nestled deep within the snow-laden forest had become more than just a refuge. It had become a sanctuary where the boundaries between the ordinary and the magical blurred. And as the hunters played their newfound instrument, they understood that their survival was more than just a matter of luck or skill. It was a gift from the spirits of the wind, a recognition of their courage in the face of the storm. The fire crackled merrily, casting dancing shadows on the walls as the hunters played. The melody flowed from their lips, weaving a tapestry of sound that spoke of their survival, their unity, and their unwavering bond as a family. The flute, once a simple toy, was now a conduit between them and the mystical forces that had saved them. With each note, they expressed a gratitude that words could not convey. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a world cleansed and renewed. And within the cozy confines of their cabin, the hunters found solace and strength in the music of the wind. The memory of the blizzard would fade, but the tale of their survival and the magic of the flute would echo through the ages, spurred by the wind itself to those who dared to listen. A child walked near the trees, alone, the flute tied to their waist. They did not intend to use it. But when the wind shifted, they felt it move, vibrate again. A deer appeared, broad antlers. Its eyes were soft and old. It should have run, but it stood still. The child lifted the flute. This time the sound came. Not loud, not sharp. A note like mist, like forgetting. The deer blinked, lowered its head, then walked away. Not frightened, not lost, just released. Here's what we're doing today. It's 3 minutes of writing every day for 5 days. That's all. So easy, even a caveman can do it. Hey, and I know this because I have tried it. Hey, as a kid, I loved writing stories. By age 12, I had written 48. My bedroom floor was littered with pages, characters, worlds, languages, maps. My parents were supportive. They bought me notebooks, pens, highlighters, folders, binders. They took me to stationery stores. They hired tutors to help me write faster. And by age 13, I had written 78 stories. That's about one every 2 weeks. And then I stopped. I went to college. I got a job. I met people, fell in love, moved in with my girlfriend, got married, started training dogs. And somewhere along the way, I forgot how to write. And here's the worst part. It wasn't that I didn't have ideas or inspiration. I had them. I still do. Every single day, I wake up before dawn, grab my phone, open an app, and there they are. Hundreds of prompts, some easy, some hard, some stupid, some genius, but every single day, I swipe away. I tell myself, I'll do it tomorrow. Or maybe I'll just keep scrolling, checking emails, watching videos, having meetings, eating lunch, going for a walk, having more meetings, drinking coffee, going back to work, working. Then I'll come home, cook dinner, eat dinner, clean up, play with my daughter, tuck her into bed, read her a story, kiss her goodnight, sit down, check my phone, see that my friend posted another video, and before I know it, it's midnight. So I go to sleep, dreaming of adventures, fairies, quests, dragons, wizards, magic, battles, wars, peace, love, loss, life, and death. And every morning, I wake up before dawn, and it all starts over again. This is why I want you to try this exercise. It's called free writing. Set a timer for 3 minutes. Then you start writing whatever comes to mind. You don't stop. You don't think. You don't edit. You just write. At first, nothing happens. Then a word appears. Write that word. Then another word. Then a sentence. You're writing now. You're actually writing. You're writing a story. It doesn't matter if no one ever reads it. God, it doesn't matter if it's stupid or makes sense. Okay? It doesn't matter if it's boring or exciting. You're writing, okay? And the only rule is to keep going for 3 minutes. That's all. When I was 13, I used to write for hours, days, weeks, months. Now I have trouble writing for 3 minutes. Can you write for 3 minutes? Here's your chance. Take this seriously. Grab a notebook, grab a pen, okay? If you don't have these, grab a piece of paper, grab a pencil, anything. Just grab something. Now, write for 3 minutes. Set a timer. Put it somewhere you can see it. And just write. Write whatever comes to mind. Write a story, write a poem, write a list, write a diary entry. Write about a character who wakes up in the morning, goes for a walk, drinks coffee, meets a friend, eats lunch, goes back home, plays with their kids, tucks them into bed, and before they know it, it's midnight. I want you to try this every day for 5 days. Day 1, write a story about a character who walks in the forest. Day 2, write a story about a character who finds an abandoned house. Day 3, write a story about a character who receives a mysterious package. Day 4, write a story about a character who wakes up in the middle of the night. Day 5, write a story about a character who has a secret. That's all. So easy, even a caveman can do it. And I know this because I have tried it. You can download the full res images from the website below. After you get done writing, look at the pictures. Take your time, let the images sink in. Think about what they might mean. Let them inspire you, then erase them from your mind. Don't let them influence what you write, but let them exist in the background. Let them be a gentle reminder that art can be beautiful, mysterious, thought-provoking. Let them be a source of calm, a moment of peace in a chaotic world. So, how was your day? Good, I hope. Did you finish your story? Great. How about the second one? Almost there. And the third one? You got this? Just one more day. And the last one, remember, it's about a character who has a secret. What kind of secret? Maybe the secret is the story. Maybe the story is the secret. Who knows? It's just right. Just right. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. You are what you carry with you when you go. That which does not need to be carried is not a burden. Many years ago, there was a village in the mountains, a village so remote that the villagers rarely saw outsiders, and even more rarely, other villages. They lived in stone houses built by their ancestors, tended fields passed down from parents to children for generations, ate food grown by the sun and watered by streams. When the snow fell, they stayed indoors and told stories by the fire. One such night, a young mother sat with her child close to the hearth. The little one was too small to tell the difference between day and night, but loved the feeling of warmth on their skin and the dancing shadows on the walls. As the evening deepened and the flames flickered lower, the mother began a story. In the days before memory, she said, her voice as soothing as the crackle of burning wood, there lived a girl who went out into the mountains every day. She would gather herbs and berries and make poultices and salves. One day, she found a cave hidden behind a waterfall. Inside was a deep pool of water, so still it looked like a sheet of ice. But when she dipped her hand in, it felt warm, almost hot. The girl drank some of the water and felt its heat spread through her body. From that day on, she returned to the cave every day. She would spend hours in the pool until her skin wrinkled like a prune and her hair turned the color of winter wheat. The child snuggled closer to their mother. A draft from the open doorway sent a chill through the room, and the little one shivered. "Don't worry, little one," the mother said, kissing their forehead. "You won't find a cave like that in these mountains. There are no pools of magic water here. You can sleep now." But that night, the child did not lie down. They simply closed their eyes, sitting by the fire, flute resting across their knees. The dream came gently. No cave, no wind, only water. Still, black water stretching endlessly, so still it looked like a sheet of ice. In the center, a boat made of bone. The child stepped in. They did not row, they did not drift, they were carried. And overhead, the stars pulsed, each one a note, each note a life already lived. When the child awoke, the sun was just beginning to paint the sky with the colors of dawn. Their mother was gone, and the house was silent. Padding to the door, the child slipped outside and into the cool morning air. Dewdrops clung to the tips of the wheat stalks, and the wind whispered secrets through the leaves. Walking to the stream, the child dipped their hand in the water and felt its coolness on their skin. Then they cupped some in their hand and brought it to their mouth. It tasted of rock and sky and the faint sweetness of summer berries. Looking up, the child saw that the waterfall their mother had told them about lay just over the next hill. Eager to begin their own story, they set off toward it, leaving the flute behind. Days turned into weeks, and the child searched everywhere for a cave like the one in their dream. They climbed to the highest peaks and slid down the greenest slopes. They followed winding paths and waded through gushing streams. All the while, they carried the memory of the cave in their heart, knowing it was there, just out of sight. Then, one day, the child heard a sound they had never heard before. It was not the cry of a hawk or the bleating of a goat, but a low, mournful note that seemed to come from the earth itself. Stopping to listen, the child realized that the sound was coming from inside the mountain. Gathering their courage, they began to climb. At first, the passage was narrow, and the air grew colder as they went higher. But after what seemed like hours, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. In the center, a single ray of sunlight fell through a crack in the ceiling and illuminated a pool of water. So still, it looked like a sheet of ice. Drawn to it, like a moth to a flame, the child stepped closer. As they approached, the water rippled, and an old woman raised her head from its surface. Eyes were like chips of obsidian, and her lips curved into a smile that did not reach them. You found the cave, she said, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. So you must be the one. Confused, the child could only nod. So you seek answers, the woman said, stepping out of the pool. But what are you willing to give in return? The child hesitated. What did the woman want? What did knowing the unknown cost? Your story, the woman said. For every answer, I will take a chapter from your story. Are you willing to do that? Desperate for knowledge, the child agreed. Very well, the woman said, dipping a finger into the pool. What do you wish to know? And the child, remembering their dream, asked, how do I get to the place of water? Still and deep, where time flows slowly and memories linger, the woman smiled. Ah, you wish to visit the place of memory, she said, her eyes gleaming. That place is within you. To reach it, you must let go of all that you are not. The child frowned. I don't understand. You seek the place of memory, but bring with you the weight of the world, the woman said, gesturing to the mountains and valleys beyond. Do you not see that what you seek is already here? Go back to the place where you began. Look again at what you have always known. Only then will you find what you are seeking. The child thought about the woman's words. Okay, did she mean that the place of memory was not in the mountains or in the cave, but within themselves? Could the answer to their question be hidden in plain sight? Confused but determined, the child thanked the woman and hurried home. When they arrived, the village seemed different. The houses looked smaller, the paths narrower. Had the child been changed in some way by their journey? Reaching the familiar stream, the child dipped their hand in the water and drank deeply. Then they walked to the tallest peak in the distance, the one their mother had told them about, and climbed to the top. Standing in the cold wind, the child looked out over the world they had been searching for and saw that the entire landscape was reflected in their own heart. The mountains were part of them, and they were part of the mountains. The trees, the rocks, the very air they breathed, all were connected to them in a way they had never noticed before. And in that moment, the child understood. The place of memory was everywhere and nowhere. It was the journey, not the destination. It was the carrying, not the burden. It's turning. The child walked back down the mountain, their steps lighter than air. When they reached the village, they went to the tallest house in the village, where the wisest elder lived. Kneeling before them was a stool, and upon it, an ancient flute. Recognizing it instantly, the child took the flute and played. Notes rang out, clear and strong, echoing the wisdom of ages past and the boundless potential of life yet to come. And as the music filled the air, the child knew that they were home. They were the keeper of the memory of the mountains, the protector of the stories told by the fire, the one who carried the songs of the ancestors in their heart. And they would carry this burden gladly, knowing that it was not a burden at all. For in carrying their heritage, their culture, their traditions, their stories, they were carrying themselves. They were carrying the mountains within them, and the mountains were carrying them. The melody faded, and the child stood up, taller, stronger, wiser. They had found the answer they had been seeking, not in a distant cave, but in the depths of their own being. They had learned that the true journey was inward, that the greatest wisdom was often hidden in plain sight, and that the most important stories were the ones that connected them to everything around them. And as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, the child knew that they were exactly where they were supposed to be. They were home, and home was where the story began and where it continued on, carrying them along with it. In this space, just above the horizon, there is a place where dreams are born. This is where the soul of the world wakes each morning. And one morning, long ago, a child woke with the sun. A child who had dreamed of playing an instrument whose music could make the stars come down and dance among the clouds. When they opened their eyes, they saw that dreams could come true. At their waist was a flute carved from the morning star. Its surface glistened like frost on a field of winter wheat. With reverence, the child reached out tracing lines of starlight etched into its surface. Then they tied it around their neck and stood. It was cold. Colder than it had been the day before, or the day before that. Each time the child breathed, a white puff escaped their lips, dancing in the air for a moment before dissolving into the vast blue. As they started their day, gathering berries and nuts and chasing rabbits across the frosty grass, the flute bounced against their back, a constant reminder of the promise held within its gleaming curves. At noon, when the sun climbed high in the sky, the child climbed a tree, sat on a sturdy branch, and brought the flute to their lips. Their fingers trembled as they began to explore its surface, finding hollows to press into, holes to cover with their breath. Then, taking a deep breath, they blew. The flute sang. Its voice echoed through the crystalline air, bouncing off the walls of the canyon until the sound returned to them. Transformed, richer, fuller, more beautiful than anything the child could have imagined. And the rabbit, frozen in its tracks, lifted its nose to the sky and twitched its whiskers, ears perked at the exquisite notes. And somewhere in the distance, a lone wolf lifted its head from its paws, its dark eyes searching the hills for the source of the haunting melody. As the hours passed, the song grew in complexity, swelling with trills and warbles, tipping and diving through scales that matched the swooping flight of a hawk overhead. Each note resonated with the strength of the mountains themselves, echoing the wisdom of ancient trees and whispering secrets carried on the wind. In its song, the flute told stories of brave hunts, of love and loss, of battles fought and won, and of the quiet joy of watching the sunrise over a sleeping world. When the last note faded into the stillness of the afternoon, the rabbit hopped away, ears still twitching to the lingering echoes, and the wolf padded back to its den, its mournful howl echoing the final sigh of the flute's lament. But the child was not done playing. They raced down the mountainside, eager to share the flute's song with the world. As they walked, they blew playful notes, chasing butterflies across fields of gold and crimson, their laughter echoing behind them. Further on, they came to a babbling brook and stopped to watch the water tumble over smooth stones. As the sound of the stream filled their ears, the child pressed their lips to the flute and began to play. And the water seemed to pause in its journey over the stones to listen. As the melody flowed, the brook joined in, its gurgling and splashing, weaving together with the flute's song to create a harmony unlike any heard before. Leaves and twigs bobbed in time to the music, and fish, curious about the enchanting sounds, broke the surface to watch the child playing on the bank. When the music ended, the brook rushed on, tumbling over the stones with renewed energy, its song mingling with the sighing wind and the buzzing of insects. The child continued on, and soon came across a cluster of tents huddled together at the edge of the forest. From the largest tent, a voice rang out, commanding everyone to gather round. As the people came together, the child stepped forward, holding the flute like a torch, and when they were all gathered close, they raised the instrument to their lips and blew. The song that poured from the flute stilled the murmur of the crowd, capturing the attention of every man, woman, and child. It spoke of journeys taken and friendships forged, of challenges overcome and victories hard won. It sang of the endless beauty of the world, the thrill of discovery, and the comfort of home. The people swayed to the rhythm of the music, their faces illuminated by the wonder in their hearts. Some closed their eyes, lost in the memories stirred by the flute's song. Others, tears streaming down their faces, embraced those standing beside them, bound together by the shared stories woven into the melody. As the final notes faded away, leaving behind an echoing silence, the child lowered the flute, their eyes shining with the reflected light of the setting sun. In that moment, they knew that the song of the flute was more than just music. It was a connection to the past, a celebration of the present, and a promise for the future. Then, as the first stars began to glimmer in the darkening sky, the child returned to their home, carrying with them the echoes of the flute's song. Night had fallen when they emerged from the forest, the last rays of daylight staining the sky with hues of purple and red. The air was cooler now, and a fine mist hung in the air, shrouding the world in a soft, ethereal glow. As the child approached the village, they heard the rhythmic pounding of a drum, accompanied by the chanting of voices raised in song. Curiosity piqued. They followed the sound, their steps lighter, their pace quicker. As they rounded a bend in the path, they came upon a clearing bathed in the warm light of a bonfire. Round the fire, a circle of villagers had gathered, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. In the center of the circle, a group of dancers moved in perfect harmony, their bodies swaying and twirling to the hypnotic beat of the drum. The child stood at the edge of the circle, mesmerized by the rhythmic movements and the infectious energy of the dancers. The music swelled, urging them closer, and the child found themselves drawn into the heart of the circle. With a smile on their face, they joined the dancers, their steps faltering at first, then falling into step with the rest. As they moved, the flute at their waist swayed with them, its gentle touch a soothing presence. The child laughed, their joy echoing in their voice as they spun and twirled, their heart soaring with the music. Then, as the night deepened, the music changed, becoming slower, more somber. The dancers fell silent, their movements becoming more deliberate, their steps echoing the solemn beat of the drum. The child felt a shift in the atmosphere, a change that mirrored the darkening sky above. In the flickering firelight, they saw the faces of the villagers etched with worry, their smiles replaced by grim determination. The music swelled again, this time carrying a message of courage and resilience. The dancers responded, their steps quickening, their movements becoming a display of strength and unity. The child, their flute clutched tightly in their hands, joined the dance, their steps firm, their movements resolute. As the night wore on, the music became a rallying cry, uniting the villagers in their shared purpose. The child, their heart pounding in their chest, danced with the strength of those around them, their movements expressing the hopes and fears that bound them together. And as the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, the music slowly faded away, leaving behind a silence heavy with the weight of the night's events. The dancers, their bodies weary but spirits unbroken, slowly came to a halt, their movements now tentative, their steps uncertain. The child, their face streaked with dirt and sweat, stood at the center of the circle, their flute dangling from their hand, their eyes fixed on the ground. As the villagers began to disperse, their voices hushed, their steps slow, the child remained motionless, lost in thought. The sky, now painted with the soft hues of dawn, offered little comfort. The child, enveloped in the chill of the morning, shivered, pulling their blanket tighter around their shoulders. With a heavy heart, they watched the villagers depart, their backs bent under the weight of their burdens, their faces etched with the hardships they had endured. One by one, the tents were dismantled, their inhabitants vanishing into the gray light of dawn. Soon, the clearing was empty, save for the child and the dying embers of the bonfire. Morning came. The child was awake before the sun. They untied the flute from their waist, held it in both hands. It was colder now, heavier. They raised it to their lips. Blue. Nothing. No hum. No echo. Just breath. But they did not try again. Because they understood. The flute had given all it could. Its song was finished. Its memory past. Now it would rest. And so would they. When the baby was born, we brought them home and set them down in the cradle. Their eyes were the color of the winter sky. And even though we couldn't understand the meaning of what they said, we knew that this little being had stories inside them. Tales woven from stardust and moonlight, and they couldn't wait to share them with us. Each night before sleep, the baby would reach out a tiny hand toward us, trying to grab hold of our fingers. And then their chubby lips would curl into a smile, and they would babble and coo, and we would laugh and play along. It was a game, an endless game of peekaboo, where the world was new and exciting, and every day was filled with wonder and delight. But as the seasons passed and the years rolled by, the game began to change. The once chubby fingers became slender and strong, capable of exploring the world beyond our little house, and the sweet babbles turned into full-fledged sentences, each one a tiny masterpiece of imagination and creativity. We remembered the day vividly. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and the child, now a curious 4-year-old, stood at the edge of the forest, staring at the trees with wide, innocent eyes. "Why don't we go there?" they asked, their voice echoing through the stillness of the woods. We smiled, thinking how far they had come since those first babbling days. "Guess, it's scary," we said, hoping to protect them from the darkness that lurked within the shadows of the trees. But the child shook their head, their eyes blazing with a determination that belied their tender years. "I want to see," they insisted, and we knew that there was no reasoning with that kind of spirit. So we took their hand and walked with them into the unknown. The forest was dark and foreboding, and the trees seemed to press in on all sides, blocking out the light of the sun. But the child's grip on our hand was firm and unwavering, and their eyes, instead of showing fear, were shining with excitement. Suddenly, a twig snapped under our foot, and we all froze, listening intently for any sign of danger. The child's grip tightened, and for a moment, we thought we might have made a mistake. But then we heard it. A gentle chuckle, like the rustling of leaves, came from behind a nearby tree. And then, to our surprise, we saw him. An old man with a long white beard and twinkling eyes was standing there, watching us with a kind smile on his face. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice like the wind whispering through the trees. "This is a dangerous place." But the child, unafraid, simply looked back at him and said, "We're not scared." The old man's smile widened, and he beckoned us closer. "Very well then," he said. "Let me show you something." He led us deeper into the forest, and soon we came to a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a small cottage, its roof made of leaves and branches, and smoke curling from its chimney. "This is my home," the old man said, "and I live here with my friends, the spirits of the forest." Before we could say anything, the child ran ahead, their laughter echoing through the trees. "Can't we play with your friends? Please, please," they begged. The old man chuckled and turned to us. "Of course," he said. "They would love that." He led us to the cottage, and soon we were sitting around a table, sipping hot cider and listening as the spirits of the forest told us tales of adventure and mystery. The child was enthralled, their eyes wide with wonder as they listened to every word. When the evening was over and it was time for us to leave, the child was reluctant to say goodbye. "Can we come back tomorrow?" they asked, their voice filled with hope. The old man smiled. "Of course," he said, "always." As we walked back to our car, hand in hand, we couldn't help but feel like we had stumbled upon a secret, a hidden world of magic and wonder that most people never got to see. We knew that we had found something special. The years kept spinning their stories, school days, friendships, heartbreaks. And as we watched, the child grew up. They didn't always tell us everything. Some things stayed between them and the whisper of the wind. But we knew that their silence was wise beyond their years. It wasn't emptiness or shyness, okay? It was full of secrets and thoughts too big for words. One day, they came back from somewhere with a wooden flute. They were older now, almost an adult, yet still with the spark of that 4-year-old adventurer in their eyes. They would sit for hours playing the flute, and we would listen, mesmerized by the haunting melody that filled the air. We couldn't understand the language of the music, but it spoke to us in a way that transcended words. It was a song of joy and sorrow, of life and death, of hope and despair, okay? And as we listened, we felt like we were being transported to another world, a world where the boundaries between reality and imagination were blurred. One evening, as the sun was setting, We sat in silence, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. The room was filled with the scent of wood smoke and memories. And suddenly, without warning, the child stopped playing their flute. They looked up at us, their eyes shining with tears. "I haven't been honest," they whispered, their voice trembling. "There are some things I haven't told you." We reached out to them, wanting to comfort them, but they pulled away. "No, you don't understand," they cried. "I'm not who you think I am." Then they ran out of the house and into the darkness, leaving us alone in the flickering light of the fire. We were worried about them. We couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside made us jump. And when the morning came, we were relieved to find them on the porch swing, their eyes closed, their breathing slow and steady. We approached them cautiously, not knowing what to say. But when they opened their eyes, we saw a new depth in their gaze, a maturity that belied their years. "I'm sorry," they said quietly. "I didn't mean to upset you." "It's all right," we replied, our voices shaking. "We just want you to be happy." But the child shook their head. "I am happy," they said. "I just needed to find myself." They took a deep breath and continued. "I've been living 2 lives, one here with you and one in the forest with the old man and the spirits. I've been learning from them, growing, becoming who I'm supposed to be." We were stunned. We had never known, but looking back, we saw signs everywhere. The way they disappeared into the woods, the hours they spent with their flute, the secrets they held so close. "But why didn't you tell us?" we finally managed to ask, the child sighed. "I didn't know how. It's not something you can explain with words, something you experience with your whole being." They paused for a moment. "Okay, but I can show you," they added with a smile, "if you're willing to come with me." We looked at each other, our hearts pounding in our chests. What were we getting ourselves into? But the look on our child's face was so full of wonder, so full of excitement, that we couldn't say no. "All right," we said, our voices trembling slightly. "Let's go." We followed the child into the woods, not knowing what to expect, but trusting that they would lead us to safety. The trees seemed to part for us, revealing a path we had never seen before. And as we walked, we felt like we were being guided by an unseen force, drawn deeper and deeper into the heart of the forest. To what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, we came to a clearing, and there, in the center of the clearing, was a cottage, just as the child had described. Smoke was curling from its chimney, and the sound of laughter drifted through the open door. We exchanged a nervous glance with our child, who nodded at us encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, we knocked on the door, and when it opened, we were greeted by the kind face of the old man. Come in," he said with a warm smile. "I've been expecting you." Inside, the cottage was filled with light, and we could hear the spirits of the forest playing and dancing in the corner. "This is my home," the old man said, his voice echoing with wisdom. "And these are my friends. They have been waiting for you." We stepped inside, and the spirits of the forest fell silent. All eyes were on us, waiting. The child stepped forward, their eyes shining with pride. "These are my parents," they said. "They're here to learn." The spirits of the forest erupted into cheers, and we were swept up in their joy. The old man placed a hand on our shoulder. "Welcome to our home," he said. "Here you will learn the secrets of the forest, the language of the wind, the wisdom of the trees." And so we began our journey. Years passed, seasons changed, the child grew. They never played again, but they listened to the wind, to the fire, to the way people paused between words. They became the one others came to when dreams didn't make sense, when silence felt too loud, when grief had no voice. They spoke rarely, but when they did, it felt like music, not from their mouth, but from something deeper, as if a flute still played somewhere beneath the skin of the world.